Have you ever had a project slip a few weeks, maybe a few months because of permits, financing, or a client dragging their feet on decisions? You were counting on that revenue. Your team was ready to go. Subs were lined up, and then the rug got pulled out from under you. Feels completely out of your control, right? Pretty frustrating. But what if I told you it's not actually completely out of your control? That you actually have more control over schedule slippage, even the kind that feels out of your control, than you think. Hey, you're listening to the Construction Leading Edge podcast, where we're all about systematizing your construction business to eliminate chaos and maximize profit, freedom, and impact. My name is Todd DeWalt. I'm the founder here at constructionleadingedge.com. And my team and I have helped over 400 construction companies eliminate chaos, grow their profits, and grow their team. And here's the thing. One construction business owner I know lost about 40% of his annual revenue in one shot because he didn't have one simple safeguard in place. And I'll tell you what that is in a few minutes. Stick around because you do not want to be in his shoes. So we're going to talk about how can you prevent project and schedule slippage when it feels like it's out of your control. Before we get started, let me ask you this. What if your competitors are using one step to boost their profits before projects even start that you're not using? You can go find out in my free buyout playbook, how to buy out a construction project playbook. It's the step that locks in profit and assigns risk before you start. Most general contractors, builders, remodelers are doing this step too late. So go get your hands on that free playbook at constructionleadingedge.com/buyout and learn the key to buying out a construction project at the right time. Okay, so when a project schedule slips a few weeks or a few months, here's what happens. Cash flow takes a hit. You still have the backlog. You still have that work in backlog. We're not talking about projects that get canceled, but projects that slip. The backlog's still there, but your payroll, your insurance, overhead, general conditions, staffing cost, they all continue to stack up. But that revenue that you were counting on to cover that overhead gets pushed down the road. Your schedule takes a hit. Also, you end up with what I would call bubbles in your schedule. If you look at your pipeline as a pipeline, you get these bubbles, and suddenly there's just a bubble in your schedule. And then maybe there's also compression, where you had a nice even flow of work, but then there's this bubble and there's no project. And then suddenly you have 2 or 3 projects more going on simultaneously. And you're trying to cram these projects in at once because they all started together. You're trying to get multiple projects started or out of the ground at the same time, or maybe even worse, you're trying to close out too many projects at one time. Bubbles in the schedule and compression in your schedule. And what I've heard from some folks is that the team's morale kind of takes a hit because they're geared up to build. They've been planning for this project, and then they're sitting on their hands waiting, and then they see this wave of work coming. They know that in a month or two, they're going to be overwhelmed. So it takes a hit on their morale. And then one of the ripple effects is your subs kind of lose faith in you. They keep getting told, hey, we're about ready to start. Get your crews scheduled. Maybe you've gotten submittals pushed through. They've ordered materials potentially. They've blocked out time in their schedule. And so they end up with bubbles and compression in their schedule. And you may end up sounding like the boy who cried wolf, saying, hey, it's time to get started. And then, hold on, hurry up and wait. And then it's time to ramp up again. And then it seems like to your subs, maybe you don't know how to manage or schedule your projects. And then when it comes to your financial goals, your targets, once those months of revenue are gone, you can't get it back. Those days are gone. You can no longer turn those days into dollars. All you have are overhead costs for those days, not enough revenue to go against it. And that, for a lot of people, causes them to miss their financial targets. They're planning on these projects coming through, and they're not able to hit their revenue targets or their profitability targets. And when they see their P&Ls, they're a few points down or maybe flat, maybe even break even year after year because these projects just don't get started on time. Now think about this. What happens when you have a nice full backlog? You've kept your foot on the gas when it comes to sales, But then you take your foot off the gas, the sales gas pedal, because you think you're about to start a bunch of projects and the pipeline is nice and full. And then one, two, or all of those projects slip by a few months. Now you're staring at this gaping hole in your pipeline. And what's it doing to your team when they see this chaos that happens pretty consistently instead of predictability? How long before your best people start thinking about leaving for a more stable company that's less like a roller coaster ride of lots of work and then not enough work? They're looking for more of a steady work environment. Here's the thing. Most contractors make this mistake. A lot of them think that the answer is to sell less, to slow down, to protect their schedule because of the unpredictability. Actually, the opposite is true. And I'll explain why in just a few minutes. But picture this instead. Imagine that you've got a steady pipeline of projects that are ready to go. And you have a big picture schedule that you can look at and see 3, 6, 9 months down the road when these projects should start. You have a good idea of what the pre-construction process looks like, and you have a good pre-construction schedule. And you're in a position where if one project slips by a few weeks or even a few months, you have enough lead time. You can see that problem coming, that you can move things around. You can slide another project in and keep your team moving and your cash flowing. Your schedule flexes. Your schedule is resilient and flexes with the changes instead of turning into chaos. And there are no more feast or famine cycles, no more roller coaster rides. And your team sees consistency. They can look down the road and they can hear you say, we're going to be starting this project at a certain time. And that project actually starts. And they can know what their workload is going to look like over the next few months. And they know they're not going to get sideswiped. Your trade partners and subcontractors have confidence in you. They respect you because you are predictable. When you call, they know you're organized. When you tell them to put a project on the schedule, they'll prioritize it because they know it's going to happen. Instead of being treated like some builders, there are a lot of subcontractors, general contractor or custom home builder calls them and says, hey, we're going to be ready to start in 30 days. The subcontractor's like, yep, I've heard that before. And their response is, you just call me when you're ready. And then best of all, imagine you're able to hit your revenue and profit goals without being at the mercy or feeling out of control of your business and feeling like your business is in the control of your clients or the permitting office or somebody out there. I'll share an example of one of our clients who talked about how he feels differently about who's in control of his business. Now, here's a 4-part framework, 4 strategies that will help you actually control these project schedule slips that may feel like they're out of your control. Okay, 3 of these will work for everybody. The first 3 strategies will work for every construction company. The 4th one will work for a lot. It may not work for everyone. Here's the deal. You can't eliminate project slippage. It's going to happen, but you can design your business to absorb it. And you actually have more control over this than you realize. So here are 4 levers that you can actually control. Here's the first strategy that puts some levers in your hands, and it's to create pre-construction milestones and expectations. Okay, to establish pre-construction milestones and expectations. Every project has a pre-construction phase, the phase that leads up to construction. It is the secret profit phase. Okay, the big contractors obsess over the pre-construction phase. A lot of smaller companies don't even think about pre-construction. They think it goes from sales to construction. That's where one of the problems lies, is the deficiency of a pre-construction phase. So here's how to think about pre-construction. First of all, every project has a pre-construction phase. Second of all, that's where the pre-construction phase is where profits and schedules are made or lost. Okay, that's why it's the secret profit phase. The key here is to start thinking differently about pre-construction and think of your pre-construction process like production. Okay, when a project goes into production, there are schedule dates, there are milestones, there are numbers and metrics that need to be hit. You need to do the same thing with your pre-construction process. Set deadlines, set milestones, put it in writing. If a client isn't ready, if a client is being indecisive, or a permit isn't ready, or a designer isn't delivering on time, then the project gets bumped. It goes to the back of the line. Stop trying to cram projects in when somebody else is not doing their job. Okay. So if there's a client delay, if they're not making decisions, if they're not delivering the design on time, if there are issues, if they're being indecisive, then that project gets bumped. It goes to the back of the line, or they pay an acceleration fee to hold their spot. Stop leaving it vague. Stop being like Burger King. Burger King's slogan used to be "Have it your way," right? We need to stop being Burger King and being more like, "This is how we do it." Okay. Having a well-defined process. This is how we do it. A lot of custom home builders, remodelers, general contractors believe that they have to let their customer define the process. Have it your way. If you want to make decisions now, that would be great. But if you don't, hey, that's okay. We'll try to cram it in later on. No, you're going to provide a custom design, a custom project, but you're not going to customize the experience. You have a standard process of this is how we do it. Okay. So stop leaving it vague and stop trying to be like Burger King and define your process. So when you have a well-defined pre-construction process with milestones and expectations and deadlines, this anchors your clients to the expectations. Okay. And concept of anchoring is when we as humans put a lot of stake, maybe a disproportionate amount of emphasis and weight on the first thing we hear. So you have probably anchored yourself when somebody has asked you, how long will this take? Or how much will it cost? And you throw out a number, and then maybe there are lots of qualifiers, and then a few months go by and the scope is completely changed and everything has been thrown out the window, and you come back with a new schedule or a new number. They say, but you told me it was going to cost this. When you hear somebody say, but you told me, that means they have been anchored. You have unintentionally anchored them to something. So we want to use anchoring for good instead of evil. And that means having a process, a pre-construction process with deadlines and milestones and consequences that you can anchor them to. All right. So here, what does this look like? I spent several years, probably 2015 through 2018, doing real estate development, building industrial buildings, 200,000 square feet. The biggest one was like 650,000 square feet. All in, I managed about 2 million square feet of these distribution center projects. We designed them we used precast concrete walls. So the exterior walls were precast concrete, built off-site in Indiana, shipped in on trucks. And the lead time on these precast panels was about 9 to 12 months out. So the first thing we would do, as soon as we had enough commitment on a project that we knew it was going to happen, was we would lock in a production slot at the precast manufacturing plant, and we would pay for that. We would lock that slot in, we would commit to it, and then they would agree to give us that production slot. And then if the time came and we weren't ready, then that production slot would go to the next person who had locked in a slot, or we would have to pay some acceleration fees to keep it. Okay. So think about your pre-construction process and your pre-construction team like a machine. Feeding this machine, projects need to move through this pre-construction machine at a certain pace. You can only have so many projects going through that machine at once, just like this precast plant rather. They only had so many tables available, so they could only build so many panels at a time, and they could only manufacture so many projects at a time. And your pre-construction team is the same way. You can only have so many projects going through your pre-construction machine at once. And if a project isn't ready, you have to bump it to the back of the line instead of just letting it back up in your pre-construction machine. So start thinking about your pre-construction process like a machine. Figure out how many projects you can handle at one time, how long it takes to push a project through pre-construction. And then when clients don't meet their deadlines or expectations, you let them know, you anchor them to the consequence up front and let them know if you don't make your decisions, that's fine. We can postpone it, but it means your project goes to the back of the line. You can't just have a project spinning in pre-construction for months of additional time. It has to get kicked out of the machine so you can move the other projects through. This is why it's so important, crucial, to have a well-designed, well-documented pre-construction process that you can share with your clients up front. Because the last thing you want to do is wait, let your clients be indecisive and then hit them with, oh, by the way, your project has been bumped to the back of the line. I know we never said anything about this before, but we're going to bump your project to the back of the line. That is a surefire way to piss off your clients, maybe even lose a job. The key is to have a process and set expectations up front, set deadlines, and then anchor your clients to that. Hey, it's Todd. We'll get back to the episode in just a minute. If you're thinking about growing your construction business, maybe you've been wondering things like, how do I know if my business can handle more work without falling apart? Is now the right time to grow, or should we stay where we're at? Am I missing something that could blow up if I scale too fast? Do I have the right structure in place to support growth and to be able to grow safely? Maybe you're worried about burning out your team or burning out yourself. You're worried about winning more work, but then losing control of the quality and having that hurt your reputation. Maybe you're concerned about getting stuck in more chaos, having more problems instead of having more freedom, or finding out too late that your systems just weren't strong enough to handle the growth. Well, here's what's surprising. A company studied why successful contractors fail, and they found out two things. Number one, contractors don't starve to death. They get too much work too fast with inadequate resources, and then they run out of cash. The second thing that they learned after studying a couple of hundred successful contractors that failed is that contractors are actually more likely to go bankrupt during a growing economy than during a downturn. So how do you know if your business is ready to scale? How do you know when it's time to hire more team members, to go after another market, to sell more work? Well, that's a big question that a lot of people are grappling with. It's a question I get a lot. So that's why I created an assessment tool to help you answer the question, is your construction business ready to scale? This assessment is free, it's online, and you'll get a customized report showing exactly where your business is strong and where the hidden gaps are that could trip you up. It's the fastest way to get clarity before you put your business and your future at risk. So if you want to take the free assessment to find out, is your construction business ready to scale? The link is in the show notes. All right, number two, the second strategy to actually control project slippage that feels out of your control is to oversell, to absorb that slippage. So what you need to do is look at your historical data. If every year for the past 10 years, you have said, I can't believe another project slipped. And here we are, we've got this bubble in our schedule. If this is happening over and over, then you need to make some changes, okay? Chances are, if you look at historical data, 5%, 10%, maybe 20% of projects get delayed. And you should not be surprised if 10% of your projects every year get delayed by a couple of months because of something out of your control. And if this is happening every year, you shouldn't be surprised, all right? This is a pattern. And the key to this is to sell more than you think you need. If project slippage is a statistical certainty, if on average 10% of your projects are slipping, then that means you need to oversell to fill in that 10%, all right? Plan for slippage as a statistical certainty and oversell. So a lot of people think that the solution is to sell less. If I'm out of control, I don't know when a project will go. I'm concerned about selling a project because I don't know when it's going to go. And therefore, I'm going to sell less. Well, that's the wrong move. The reality is if you only sell enough just to get by, think about it. If you're selling at 100% of your capacity and then 10% of your projects slip a few months, maybe slip into the next year, and then you look at your financials and you are consistently 10% below revenue, 10% below your profit target, you need to oversell. So if you're only selling just enough to get by and you're consistently having projects slide into the next year, you're setting yourself up for failure. Overselling gives you the buffer to cover these inevitable, almost certain delays, right? Now you may be thinking, what if I oversell and all my projects come through on schedule and everything goes perfectly. Let me ask you a few questions. First of all, what are the odds of everything going perfectly? Over the past 10 years, how often has that happened? Now, I will tell you, once you put the first strategy into place, you have a good pre-construction process, and you're setting those expectations, that is going to reduce your project slippage some. But let me ask you this question. Which would you rather have? A big bubble in your schedule and all this overhead costs that you don't have any revenue to cover? Or would you rather have 10% too much work and have to figure out how to cram 10% more work? Which of those problems would you rather have? They're both problems. One's a good problem and one's a bad problem. So that's my question for you. If you're like, what happens if everything goes perfectly? My question for you is, which problem would you rather have? 10% too much work or a big bubble in your schedule? You get to choose. The third strategy is to establish in your pre-construction schedules and in your production schedules, establish firm go, no-go dates. This is the safeguard that would have helped the contractor I mentioned earlier. Here's the deal. He had landed a big project that represented about 40% of his annual revenue. One of the bigger projects he'd ever done. He had received a commitment. They had gone through pre-construction and they had a start date, let's say in early September. And they'd gotten a commitment months before that. And then time just kept marching on. And it was the end of June, no contract. They're still working through things. Everything still looks good. At the end of July, working through things. And then 2 weeks before the project was supposed to start, clients still hadn't signed a contract and they backed out. Something happened and they got spooked and they backed out. So here they were. This remodeling contractor was 2 weeks out from starting this project that would have represented 40% of his annual revenue. It was about 6 months worth of work. Everything was great. He had made his financial forecast based on that. And suddenly, poof, it was gone. This giant bubble in his schedule. And it may have still had some life, but it wasn't going to happen. And he had planned on that revenue, about 5 or 6 months worth of revenue that suddenly just slipped off the calendar. And the solution that we worked out to prevent this from happening was to set go, no-go dates at a certain time. Every project has a natural go, no-go date, right? So what are we talking about here? When a plane is taking off or landing, there's a certain point where they either have to take off, either go, or they throttle down and they don't take off, or they no-go. There's a certain point on the runway where they commit and they have to go or not go. And every project is the same way. So in this case, this specific project, the go, no-go point was probably 90 days before the start. And what my client realized he should have done was he should have established a go, no-go date 90 days before the start that said, all right, at 90 days, we need to have a signed contract. We need to have selections made. There are these certain things that have to be in hand and complete for us to move forward. The go, no-go point was 90 days out, for example. On smaller projects, it could be shorter, might be 2 weeks, it might be 30 days, but every project, depending on the size and complexity, has a go, no-go date. And if you don't have everything you need to start the project, at that point, you have to make a decision to go or no go, and then move another project into that slot. What you need to think about is, how much time do I need to spin up another project? It could be a couple of weeks. It could be 90 days. For some projects, it might be 6 months. Depends on your business and the complexity of the project and your backlog. But the key is establish a go, no-go date that gives you enough time to pivot and spin up another project instead of leaving a big gaping hole in your calendar. So again, think about your business like a machine that turns backlog into revenue. All right. It turns days into dollars. And for every machine, every business, there's an optimal amount of revenue that it can produce every month based on your overhead costs, based on your staffing. There's this optimal amount of revenue that every business can produce every month. So it's profitable, doesn't put too much strain on the team. And your job as the business owner, or somebody's job, is to keep the hopper full on your machine. All right. You need to be able to look far enough ahead to look at the hopper and see, hey, it's going to take a little while. If the hopper is getting a little bit low on these raw materials that are going into our machine, we need some time to go get some more and fill up that hopper. You need to be able to look far enough ahead to see if projects are moving through pre-construction in time to be ready for production. But somebody needs to be looking at the hopper on your machine that is your business and be able to say, look, at this point, we have to make a go, no-go decision on this project. And if you don't have everything ready to go, we have to get the next project spun up and into production so we can keep our machine full. So if your clients are not going to be ready, if there's some issue, you need to move to the next project or move the next project into that production slot so your machine can generate the revenue that you need it to. The fourth strategy, fourth lever you can pull, this works for some, not all, but it is the flex track project. This is a strategy that I developed with the gentleman who had the sudden bubble in his schedule. And the flex track project strategy is to keep a backlog of smaller projects that can be spun up quickly. Not a lot of design required, no long lead items, maybe not a lot of permitting, not a lot of pre-construction. And imagine having, let's say, if you're a $5 million a year company and you have projects that are slipping periodically, you have some big projects. The way this would work is you would have some flex track projects. Let's say you would have $250,000 worth of flex track projects, a few $50,000 projects over the course of a year that are relatively simple, that you can spin up quickly, and these jobs would be sold, and the client would have the understanding that they'll be done on a flexible schedule. We'll fit this in when we can, sometime in the next 6 months. So when a big project does slip, you have something to drop into its place to keep the pipeline moving. So for a remodeling contractor, this might be smaller projects like a deck or window replacement or some things like that are relatively simple, not a lot of design, not a lot of permitting, not a lot of pre-construction effort required. And you have these projects sitting on the shelf, sitting in the hopper, so to speak, ready to go in the event that something slips. So the flex track project. Those are the four strategies. Number one, set pre-construction milestones. Have a pre-construction schedule with milestones and expectations. Number two, absorb that slippage by overselling. Sell more than 100% of your capacity. Number three, every project has a firm go, no-go date. And then number four is the flex track project. Again, that works for some, not all. Now I can hear what you're saying. I can read your mind. Maybe thinking, these delays are out of my hands, right? These delays are out of my hands. They're client delays. How can I control them? For some situations that may be true, but not all delays are out of your hands. They're not completely out of your control. A lot of these delays are a system problem, not just a client problem. Okay. Speaking of clients, you may be thinking clients are the problem. You should expect this with clients. If you expect clients to be professional clients, this is all they do, to understand the process and be decisive and responsive and follow schedules, you're probably delusional. So clients are not the problem. The problem is that you don't have a documented process to hold them accountable to. You don't have something that you can confidently share with them and then hold them accountable to. It's a lack of process. You may be thinking, but even if I try, the permits and inspectors are going to blow things up, so why even bother? Maybe, but imagine if you are overselling, if you've set milestones with your clients and you've built in go, no-go dates, that's going to protect you from a lot of these anomalies, these things that truly are out of your control, right? Yes, inspectors are out of your control. The permit office is out of your control, but there are things you can do to be resilient and absorb it. And you need to expect it. Expect that these things are going to happen and then have some systems in place. So here's the thing I want you to take away from this is that you have more control over project slippage that feels, quote, out of your control than you may think. I'll say that again. The reality is you have more control over project slippage that feels out of your control than you think. The key is to have a documented pre-construction process that lays out milestones, consequences, You need to have overselling strategy to deal with the statistical certainty of project slippage, have no-go dates for every project, and then potentially have a flex track project hopper ready to go. These are things you need to have. If these things are happening over and over, you have a couple of options. You can bitch and moan about projects slipping every year, or you can do something about it to make your business more resilient and prevent these things from happening. Here's the hard truth, right? If you don't put this in place, if you don't take some action, then project slippage, it's going to keep wrecking your financials. It's going to keep creating bubbles and compression in your schedules. It's going to keep messing up your cash flow, putting stress on your team, straining your trade partner relationships, and you'll stay stuck in the cycle year after year, blaming other people, pointing fingers at other people, maybe hoping it'll be different, but it won't. GCs and custom home builders and remodelers and trade contractors who seem to be thriving, and you don't hear them complaining about these things. It's not that they're luckier than you. They have systems that put them in control. Speaking of control, one of our clients shared this during one of our weekly coaching calls in our Systematize Your Construction Business program. He said this, quote, "I had a realization this week that I'm not really running my business, my clients are. They're blowing up the scope, eating into estimating, and operating in chaos that spills on to me." Does that sound familiar? Do you ever feel like your clients may be running your business? Well, here's what he said after a few weeks in our program. He said, "I'm finally starting to get clarity on how I want to set things up. For years, I was running haphazardly with everything in my head, trying to keep my fingers in everything. Now I've mapped out roles and I'm defining pre-construction. It's freeing to trust people and actually feel in control." So let me ask you something. How long have you been thinking about putting systems and processes in your business? How long have you been saying, "Oh man, we got to do something about these projects slipping. We've got to do something about these clients being indecisive. How long have you been saying we need a pre-construction process?" Or maybe you're not sure what it was, but maybe you're saying something's missing. There's just something missing and I can't seem to put my finger on it. How long have you been saying, "I should have more freedom. I should be able to take a vacation. I should be making more money. I should have less stress, but I'm so slammed, I don't know where to start"? And how much is the COI, the cost of inaction, profit bleeds from rework, schedule delays, giveaways, the missed opportunities? How much sleep are you losing because of the stress of the business and the frustration? And what price is your team paying from the lack of these systems? And then what about your family? What price is your family paying because of the stress of your business? What are you concerned might happen if nothing changes, right? If the chaos continues, are you concerned about your reputation with clients? Some are concerned about losing key employees who get stressed out and go somewhere else. Look, you know you need this, right? You know you need to put systems and processes in place. You've been thinking about it for months. Maybe you've been saying it for years. Your team is asking for it. Every time there's a mistake, you think, we could have prevented this if we just had the right systems in place. You just don't have time to figure it out for yourself. Maybe you've tried to DIY these things and you're telling yourself, yeah, I'll figure it out. I can do this. I can figure these things out. But if you were going to do it yourself, wouldn't you have already done it yourself? So if you own a custom home building business, a remodeling business, or a commercial general contracting business, and you're doing over $2 million in annual revenue, if you're stuck in the day-to-day, if you can't take a real vacation, you can't turn the business off, if you feel like you own a job and not a business, this is for you. Okay, I'm looking for 5 construction business owners this month to help systematize your business in 8 weeks. So the team runs the projects and you get your time back. If it's not a fit, we'll tell you pretty quickly and point you in the right next step. If that's you, I encourage you to go schedule a free business evaluation call with my team. The link is in the show notes, or you can go directly to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, APPLY, where you can go to our website, constructionleadingedge.com, click on the apply now button on the website and book your free business evaluation call. We're only opening 5 spots in our program this month. So if you want to get off the hamster wheel, go grab your call right now. That's constructionleadingedge.com/apply. apply. Hey, before you go, if you're a custom builder, remodeler, or commercial GC doing over $1 million a year, what if you're missing one crucial step that could protect your margins before you even break ground? That's why I put together the free How to Buy Out a Construction Project Playbook. It's going to show you how to lock in costs, secure your subs, and protect your profit before jobs start. Would it be a bad idea to spend a few minutes to download a playbook that could add 3 to 7 points of net profit to your bottom line on every project? You can go get your copy of that playbook and that training for free at constructionleadingedge.com/buyout. There's no guarantees how long this will be free. It's available now for a limited time. That's constructionleadingedge.com/buyout. BUYOUT.